dark, dark tomb there was a dark, dark street, and in the dark, dark street there was a dark, dark office. In the dark, dark office there were some dark, dark stairs, and down the dark, dark stairs there was a dark, dark room, and in the dark, dark room was where the worst wrestling tropes go to die.
Hello, I'm Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic Wrestling, and welcome to the latest thrilling instalment of Straight to Hell, the show, of course, where my illustrious guest offers up lists of their pet peeves from the world of professional wrestling, and they all get sent down straight to hell to rot for the rest of eternity. Joining us today, it's Jim Sterling. That's it. What more needs to be said? Over to you, Ross and Jim. All right then, so we're joined by Executive Commander / Champion Regions, I beg my pardon, of Rise Wrestling, Jim Sterling. How are you doing, Jim?
Hello. What an honour to be here. As someone brand new to Cultaholic, I don't think we've ever had any interaction in the past that no one will have ever asked either of us about. So as a first-time caller to Cultaholic, I'm thrilled to be here representing Rise Wrestling as Grand Champion Regent, no less, for the duration of this whole quarantine unpleasantness.
So you are one of the few people in the world today to have actually enjoyed COVID and used it to some sort of advantage.
Well, I wouldn't say it was used to an advantage. I consider it to be a very heavy burden. I often say heavy is the shoulder that holds the gold. So it's a burden in some ways, but also a privilege and an honour. And I do it purely for the good of professional wrestling.
Obviously, I didn't mean to sort of disparage anything you do with that role of yours, but I've got to ask, do you know the Duke? And if so, where does the Duke get his capes from? Because as a guy who used to like a dabble in a cape here or there, they're top tier, they are fantastic, and I want to know where they're from.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, there was some royalty figure was handing them out in an alleyway, said they had no more use for them because, it was kind of old hat and people didn't really want to see, fat people dressed up as kings. And I said, bugger to that, and took it off their hands. So it may actually be the same one that was used by someone who is...
Wow. Yeah. Because as someone who is maybe a relative to someone who used to sort of fit that description, I like to do it on a Sunday just to remind me of better times, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I draw faces on the wall and have conversations with them to remind myself of what a social life used to be like. I'm only joking, of course. I never had one before lockdown started. So, in many ways, my life hasn't changed.
Same here. I've been self-isolating for a long, long time with my social life, let me tell you that. And I've got to ask, have you met Cody Rhodes yet?
No, actually.
Have you prepared for this event? It's eventually going to happen, Jim. It's eventually going to happen. And how will you sort of deal with this situation when it does happen? It's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm just going to, cross my fingers and hope to high hell that he's never seen the stuff that got me involved in indie wrestling in the first place. If he's never seen Stardust, then he and I might get on like a house on fire. If he has... well, any pipe dream I may have had of ever being on Dynamite could be kissed goodbye.
Why do you think he won't like it?
I don't know if I'd like it. I did it, and I'm not sure I like it.
I always took it as a homage to Stardust.
It was in many ways, yeah. It was. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Goldust and Cody Rhodes, and I genuinely love the Stardust gimmick, and I know, he has a bit more of a less fond memories of it, but I don't know if I could stop myself just reaching out and saying I loved you as Stardust. I don't think he'd appreciate it, and it wouldn't be sarcastic. That's the thing; it wouldn't be sarcastic.
To be fair, the final sort of dying embers of Stardust when he was with the Ascension doing all the stuff with the telescopes and the weird wacky room they had together, I thought that was good stuff and it could have gone somewhere, but hey ho, like they always do, they just take the good stuff and just cast it off to one side.
Yeah.
and
you can't say Cody's suffering in the long run for it, so
no,
hats off.
He must have been cursing his luck at the time, though. You would have thought he couldn't have seen everything that's happened over the past couple of years happening, surely.
Sure, yeah.
It's amazing what's happened, though, because I've been listening to a few interviews you've done over the last little while, and AEW rekindled your love for professional wrestling, I've learned. Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly kept things stoked and interesting for me during lockdown, you know. I moved here to Philadelphia just before everything shut down. I was due to do some work with Chikara, then everything shut. And then Chikara shut, and just been kind of spinning my wheels up here a bit. But AEW has just the way they've been rolling with lockdown and still producing a show and still producing a live show, not just relying on the cinematic stuff, which is great. I love that kind of thing. But the way they've managed to keep watching the in-ring entertainment interesting and not awkward and sort of mildly embarrassing, as it can do if you present it wrong. That's kept me looking forward to things coming back. Certainly so I can, you know, find some way to continue contributing to it. And honestly, just looking forward to seeing how everything looks and feels when people come back. Because it's not just AEW, certainly up here in the Northeast, there have been so many more moves made in independent wrestling. I was recently part of MV Young's Polyam Cult Party 2 in September, which was a huge LGBTQ plus predominant wrestling event. And it's really exciting that a lot of wrestlers have come together in recent months and started finding ways to lift each other up and putting on, building their own platforms to give others a shot. Guys like Effie have been doing the same thing with Effie's Big Gay Brunch and stuff like that. So yeah, it's exciting to see. And AEW certainly kept me more invested where other comparable companies may not have. Is it just the way WWE do their business? Is that what sort of just drove you away from them, or was there more to it? Was it more, you know, the storylines that were maybe being produced, or was it just the way Vince McMahon likes to do things? Because you're very outspoken about those sort of issues on social media, I see. Sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of that comes from my, my work in games media and criticising the way various corporate interests behave. Over time, that has become a broader criticism of just the way capitalism is now, the way it places businesses over people and everything. And I look at the abuses that encourages. And then I look at something like WWE, and I can't in good faith, as someone who talks about this stuff and criticizes this stuff, I can't in good faith support a company like WWE myself, because of the way it treats its talent, because of the unethical behavior I see there, not just with regards to the way it treats talent here, but the way it deals with certain other interests, certain controversial interests. And Vince McMahon himself is someone who has turned the commodification of human talent into itself entertainment when he goes out there and shows off to quote unquote heels like Kevin Owens, that if he protests being abused by management, he will be seen in a court of law where Vince McMahon will sue the pants off him and the crowd cheers like he's the face. And I'm like, do we not remember what we were taught in the 80s? We were told to boo the likes of Weyland Yutani. Do none of you remember RoboCop?
Yeah. What was I going to say? I was going to bring up... I know, obviously, we're here to speak about professional wrestling today and the things you want to send to hell. And I'm guessing sort of the business practices of WWE might come up once again. But sure, YouTube, how hard would you send them to hell if you could send them to hell today?
I would send YouTube to the YouTube's comment section. That is the level of disgust, acidic rage that I have reserved for the likes of YouTube and its Google taskmasters. I mean, I don't know where we start with this discussion. It's really hard. It's become increasingly harder month on month to do all of which. For sure. Yeah. It's an absolute disaster. I mean, that made the executives of Google have their souls churning in YouTube's algorithm until the end of time, because I would rather anyone else actually deal with that hellscape than I. Can you work out the algorithm? I can't. No, because the moment you do, everything H.P. Lovecraft wrote about, you would begin to also understand, and you would go mad from the revelation.
Yeah. It's a terrible world we live in today, isn't it? It used to be a lot easier. Why did it change? Do you know why it changed? You've got a more informed opinion than I sat here.
I often wonder if things ever changed, or if as you get older, the veil just drops off.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, look at the way things are right now, with your ruling classes and your serfs underneath, your big corporate interests lobbying, getting all the laws changed. Earlier this year, I started getting into reading about like Georgian era England. It was exactly the same bollocks.
You don't think they put those two eras together, do you? YouTube and the Georgian era? You think
No.
But no.
But as one of YouTube's finest wearers of powdered wigs and royal coats, I feel like I'm somewhat qualified.
Yeah. And just before we get going with the straight to hell portion, you've obviously worked as a manager and as a wrestler, all sorts in between. Which do you prefer? I've always wondered because obviously the differences between each role, they're very obvious to me, sat here, someone who's never done any of them. But which do you prefer? Because you're very well suited to all of them, all of the above. Yeah,
well, I mean, when it comes to the wrestling side, there's a little more smoke and mirrors to that than there is for people who are actually, talented. When I've done wrestling matches, it's been more sort of the showcase thing, and I'm very, very carried. It's very fun, also terrifying. And even though it's it's kept simple for me, if the promoter's smart, it's kept fairly simple for me. It's still, there's so much pressure there. It's terrifying because you've got other people to worry about. Mm-hmm. If I've just got to go out there with a microphone in my hand and just make everyone there absolutely hate me, I mean, I was doing that before I got into the wrestling side of things. That's easy. So I think for me, it's the management is where I should be, because of the way I look and dress and behave. Having some physicality to that is worth doing. But I like this weird space I occupy where it's this manager but carries the swagger and pomp and circumstance of a wrestler. And, when that veneer is shattered at the end of whatever story's being told, it just makes it all the more satisfying that the manager being beaten up on isn't someone defenseless like Paul Bearer begging for his life, but someone like me, someone who they've dressed up like a wrestler. They're acting like a wrestler. They're about 6'2". You don't feel so bad when they're on their knees begging for mercy. So I like this weird blend.
Oh, that was a big noise. What the hell was that?
Sorry, my microphone has changed on Zoom. Sorry, hang on. What's happened here? Why are you doing that to me?
You still sound the same now, yeah?
Yeah.
It was just a massive clang there, but we'll move past that.
Speaking of telling lies.
Speaking of clangers, 2K20. I've got to ask your opinion on that. That was a good segue. I'm a professional at this. What's your thoughts on 2K20, the entire sort of like 2K21 going away for a bit and hopefully to come back as a better wrestling game?
Well, it was very funny watching the reactions to 2K20 because I listened to some wrestling commentary and content and stuff, you folks and What Culture and Brian Alvarez, who knows nothing about video games. So it was really fun trying to see him try and work out why this was a bad game, why WWE would have a bad game. And I'm sat there thinking, as someone who has spent so much time covering the game industry, I was like, I have an idea. Let's explain the entire socioeconomic problem of the so-called AAA video game business model. So it was interesting from that regard, watching these two mediums that I follow and sort of dabble around in various elements of, seeing them come together. But yeah, it's another annualized sequel from a publisher that is more interested in making money from microtransactions and gambling mechanics in games and stuff like that, rather than making a quality product. There are many factors into why that game went wrong, but all that really needs to be said is that it was hilarious. The creator character mode with the hair it was like Medusa on amphetamines. It was just amazing. The hair had a mind of its own, but it all got made up for by the fact that instead of a WWE 2K game this year, we got Battlegrounds, the best game that has ever been a really, really crap game.
I've played all but 5 minutes on Battlegrounds, and I'm going to sit here and just concede.
You've played all that there is to Battlegrounds then. That's it.
That was it. I was just sat there mashing buttons, and then things were happening, suplexes were happening. I was playing as Bray Wyatt. He whacked out a car, I think, and threw it at someone. Or was it a cello or something like that? It was. You'll
weird. Appreciate this, because most of the time I've talked about this, I've talked about it to the video game audience, right? Mm-hmm. You'll appreciate this. No one else understands why I'm so incredulous, why I get so worked up about it. In Battlegrounds, Bray Wyatt has the same moveset as Mandy.
I'm shocked you know about Mandy.
You wound me, sir.
But I can see the issue of how, Mandy in the female division, doing her. She's not. Bray Wyatt's a big fella. Let's just say that much. He shouldn't have the same moveset as Mandy Rose, should he?
Mandy Rose.
You'll understand, yeah.
I think there's like 3 movesets in the whole game shared between, everyone from, Ricochet to Jake the Snake. And they're all sharing these movesets. It's amazing. And a whole bunch of wrestlers that by the time the game came out had either been let go or were now weekly appearing on Dynamite. That was also quite entertaining.
It was weird how they sort of pulled the 2K strand of games. I guess don't know what the actual the series of games I should say. And Battlegrounds became a thing. I was thinking, Battlegrounds. I'm assuming it's a new game from the build up. What is it? Or is it an engine that's been used before? It was weird how they stopped producing one series, but then that was there all ready to go to take its place. It was weird how that was sort of.
Yeah, but they're probably working on that in the background. It's got one of those battle royale style elements to it, so they were clearly trying to see what they could get out of that market. It looks like a mobile game, except I've seen WWE mobile games, and the character art is way better in any of those than it is in this. Some of these character models, you wouldn't know who they were unless they weren't wearing a t-shirt with their logo on it. Thank God WWE forces all wrestlers to wear their merchandise, no matter how tacky and pathetic it looks with some of the gimmicks, because otherwise I wouldn't know who they were in WWE Battlegrounds, the hot new game from 2K Games.
And finally, just before we get going with the straight to hell portion, what is the best wrestling video game of all time, Jim?
The best wrestling video game of all time. Let me have a think about
It's a loaded question, I know.
See, the main problem is I hate all video games and anyone who plays them. That's, whenever I'm not on a video game platform, I try and remind people about it. I should have said before we started. I liked the SmackDown ones. On the PlayStation. Those were the ones I played the most of. There are better ones, but those were the ones that I have the most memories of, so they're the ones I always bring up there. I think it was there 2 of them? SmackDown and Bring the Pain?
Yeah, there was SmackDown 1 and Just Bring It, wasn't there? And Know Your Role. And Here Comes the Pain and SmackDown versus Raw and all that stuff.
So I liked one of those. Whichever one the common consensus says is good, so it looks like I know what I'm talking about, that one.
I'll say Here Comes the Pain for you, because that's my favourite.
There we are.
I love Here Comes the Pain. So let's get going with the straight to hell portion. We've rambled for long enough, Jim. What's your first offering from the world of professional wrestling that gets sent down straight to hell?
Okay, my first suggestion is the way the independent contract has become enshrined in professional wrestling, World Wrestling Entertainment specifically. Now, before we go on, I want to say that what I am about to tell you is purely my opinion and does not reflect the opinion of anyone else. But in my opinion, WWE is a racket. It's a racket designed to draw in young talent, people in their really early 20s, people who shouldn't be signing contracts in their early 20s. I should know. I've done it. Not a great idea, but they get locked into these contracts where they are called independent contractors, but they are treated more like actual human property. Things that I believe go beyond the bounds of even a full-time employee, but they're not even that. They're locked into these contracts where, unlike other independent wrestlers, in independent wrestling, they can't wrestle independently. They can't go to another promotion, be it a main competitor like AEW or even just some small place. On top of that, they overreach to the point where they can't even go on Twitch now or OnlyFans or some other form of monetization without the blessing of the company. That's not what you do in an independent contract. The only reason they're independently contracted is because Vince McMahon doesn't want to give them the benefits of full-time employees, doesn't want to give them health insurance, doesn't want to give them other sort of employee protections, doesn't want things like unionization, which I do think, in lieu of any representation and protections for wrestlers, yes, we should have some. What we do not need are these so-called independent contracts that change a wrestler's name so they can't bank on it when they leave, take over their social media so they can't use it, so they're forever tied to this company that doesn't even give them health insurance. And one thing that needs to be remembered here, because I think one issue is many wrestlers remember where they came from. If they make it to TV, they remember how hard things were. But what people don't remember is that these are international television stars. They're international TV stars. I make more money than some of them. Like on the lower card, seriously. And I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be. It's not a flex. They should be paid like goddamn stars. Like TV stars, if not sports stars. I mean, Jesus. To not even give them health insurance, to tell them how they can make money outside of the company, to restrict them in all of the ways an employee is restricted, and then some, only to afford them no benefits, and maintain so much power that if they're injured, they can tack time onto their contract. If they leave the company, they can't go anywhere else for Lord knows how many time, Lord knows how long. And I say time, that's the most valuable asset a wrestler has. Mm-hmm. If you're giving years to a company, those are years you won't get back in such a physical sport. People are losing years to a company that will give them nothing in return. And you know, for some people in like the upper echelons of that company, they will do very well from it. They absolutely will. But that's true of any major company. Any huge corporation will always look after a few people, and the rest of the people are there to churn and be fuel in the engine. So I really think that, you know, WWE needs to not be in this position of total authority where it can just buy up so many contracts and do nothing with them and jettison people by the boatloads whenever they decide to cut corners, because heaven forbid any executive take a bit of a pay cut. And instead you just get exploitation all the way down.
Yeah. Speaking of exploitation, just on the monetary side of things, I'm sure you saw the reports of Zelina Vega allegedly making more money via Twitch than she did via her downside as a wrestler. And you think about the lifestyle they had pre-pandemic, of course. I know they reduced to one show a week and everything, but they're on the road 4 or 5 days a week. That just boggles my mind completely.
Yeah. I mean, before COVID, let's not forget how much these people were being worked, touring around the nation, around the world, all year, working on Christmas, working on you know, throughout all holidays, never taking a break. No off season for wrestlers, no off season whatsoever. And WWE has enough talent that rather than splitting its roster into 2 concurrent shows, it can split the roster into 2 different seasons. Yeah. It's got this power, it just doesn't want to. We're right now in the middle of COVID. WWE, like so many already very, very rich entities, has made more money than ever, while so many other people struggle to make a single bean. It has made more money than ever. The amount of cash it rakes in from these TV deals alone is enough to make a child with no concept of money nonetheless vomit in disgust. And their answer in a pandemic is to fire people, put them on, you know, on the bench, and not once consider even letting the wrestlers make money on their own, let alone coming up with some ideas to, I don't know, protect the most important people in the wrestling industry, the wrestlers.
Yeah. And I guess it's a weird thing to say. It's a good thing that might come of COVID. But apparently one of the people they let go was high up on the sort of live event schedule and all the merchandise that is sold on live events and stuff. So maybe that's hinting potentially at the business changing, and that these 4 and 5 days and travelling endlessly, maybe those days are coming to an end. And I guess hopefully that is the case. It's a weird thing to say in the midst of all people like losing their jobs and stuff, but maybe the business is about to change, and rightfully so, I'm guessing, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, when COVID first hit, there was a lot of people wanting to push us back to normal, and then there were a lot of people pointing out that normal is what got us here. Normal is why so many infrastructures are failing to deal with this. And the same can go for wrestling. So many people are going to be so grateful to go back to normal that they won't look at some of the things that happened just this past year, like the speaking out movement and the stories that came from that. My fear is that things won't change because we'll be so desperate to go back to what we had and not realize that that's just setting us up for the exact same fall later down the line.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I was just going to say that just one last point to the touring. Something does have to change there, though, because something will have to give, and right now it's wrestlers' bodies. The WWE style, is called that soft, safe style. Look at how many injuries they still have. That's just going to happen when you work them as long and hard as you work them. No matter how safe the style is, if you're dropping down on canvas, night in, night out, getting on a plane, cramping up, going and you're going to break. Mm-hmm. You just will.
And it baffles you when you hear of Paige, who broke her neck twice while wrestling for WWE, then having her Twitch, or being told, Paige, you have to stop with your Twitch and all that. It's just something, there needs to be a bit more balance in how they do their business.
It's inhuman. It's genuinely inhuman. And it's a level of exploitation that is so wanton and open. And because wrestling occupies this weird niche where not a lot of people, and again, I see this in the video game stuff where I talk about the exploitation and abuses there. They're markets and niches in entertainment that the law doesn't quite understand because it's a little bit weird. So it allows very experienced exploiters like Vince McMahon to go in there and make these strange little arguments about how, they're on an independent contract, even though they are completely beholden to us. Something's got to give in the end.
Yeah. I'm just going to say something that Dave Meltzer, who appeared on this bollocks a while ago, he told me that I'm just going to sit back and let you rant about it, because I'm sure it might set you off, it might not, but let's bank on it doing so. That the people who work in WWE HQ in Stamford, Connecticut, they get health insurance, but the wrestlers don't. I'm just going to sit back and let you say some things.
So, what do you want to talk about next?
It's weird. People sitting down at a desk get health insurance, but the wrestlers breaking their necks, they get nothing.
Oh, you don't have to keep saying it. I'm over it. You don't have to keep saying it. They get health insurance, you say. Well, I never. I wonder if they also get, I don't know, $1 million incentive bonuses before they even lift their lazy bloody fingers, because I know that happens in a number of other industries. These industries where you see mass bloody layoffs by the hundreds to save money that one executive in a company could cover. Vince McMahon's a billionaire, right? Do you know how rich billionaires are? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. $1 million is enough for any single human to live on. Once you've done that, ding, 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 you've won capitalism. Gold star for you. But no, they have more money than any collection of people could ever need. And rather than sacrifice, not the money they have, the billions they have, a couple mil coming in, rather than sacrifice that, they would rather jettison tens, hundreds in some cases of jobs, ruin lives, because they didn't want to not even inconvenience themselves. Vince McMahon is so rich, right? He could subscribe to every OnlyFans account, not just Zelina Vega's, not just any wrestlers. He could subscribe to every single one and be exactly as rich tomorrow as he is today. We're not even talking a drop in the ocean.
It puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think we've covered all the bases there, Jim. What's your second offer?
I think we have. Right. Let me check my list. The others are a little more light-hearted. We're all right now.
That's a shame. I was quite enjoying that.
Right. So next up, let's do Heat by any means. Heat by any means.
So, I'm guessing this goes down the more tasteless route that we've seen in the past.
A little more, yeah. It can also extend to other things as well. If you want to broaden it to that, you know, just baffling booking decisions that just annoy everyone. This idea that heat by any means is okay. Like one retort that I've often had to push back against with people is the phrase, "It worked, didn't it?" If your aim is to just upset people, then sure, any behavior you engage in is successful. But if you're in this business to just upset people, you're in the wrong business. You know, try being a right-wing stand-up comic. That's what they do. They're more interested in upsetting people than telling jokes. They'll tell you themselves. And I don't think you want to be in the same bracket as Tim Allen. I don't think anyone should want that. But you get these instances where a heel will come out and say the most offensive stuff possible, you know, lay it in with the homophobia, the racism, whatever, and believe to themselves that they did their job. But the problem is there is a difference between on-screen fictional villainy and just replicating hate, just replicating actual real life terrible behavior. And that's something that we really need to differentiate here. Even as a heel, your job ultimately is to give the audience a good night. And that may involve really getting under their skin. But that's got to be tempered by something else, by something they're entertained and enthralled by. And it's a hard balance. It's a hard thing to balance out. I mean, I've made these mistakes. I yelled, "Shut your goddamn mouth" to a group of children, which doesn't sound bad until you remember it was in Mississippi. And that was worse than when Jeff Cobb was at that exact same promotion, exact night as me, and yelled shit. And he got off lighter than I did. And then that was something I had to work out was it was very easy to get heat in the South by doing stuff like that. But you can throw some blasphemy in without like yelling "goddamn" in a child's face in a way that will, you know, just change the atmosphere of the room. And that's what you've got to avoid. JBL goose stepping, that famous image. Yeah, it got heat. But it also made WWE as a platform, as the amplifier of that behavior, pathetic. Because even as a heel that's positioned as someone who hates the company, you're still part of that promotion's storyline. You're still part of that promotion's presentation. And even as a villain, what you do reflects on the company, and it reflects on their values, especially if you go out there and you rattle off a whole bunch of hateful rhetoric. And we get no indication that it's not meant, that it isn't sincere. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, there's a difference between people hating the cartoony character, the villain you put out there, and just looking at you as a performer and thinking, you're a real prick.
This is going to sound awfully weird, Jim, but all the way through that, I was thinking about Shane McMahon.
No, you're 100% right. You are genuinely right. Like, that's on obviously the less
it's not in terms of like the racial and politically
offensive thing, but it's the same deal. It's people are booing Shane McMahon. Let's keep doing it. Let's keep getting heat. There's got to be a payoff to that heat sometime. You can't just keep pissing people off. And I mentioned the stand-up comedy thing earlier. More than just a snap, like, that's genuine. There are comedians that go out there. I used to be a complete edgy dick when I first started doing anything with an audience. And it wasn't clever, it wasn't funny, it wasn't entertainment. Because if you go out there with the sole purpose of giving someone a bad night, then what you've done for your promotion is giving it a bad night.
But it's weird you were going off there about all that stuff, and I was just thinking, Shane McMahon's push, 2016 to 2019, that's all I could see coming back into my head, because
no, I mean, WWE
it didn't benefit anybody, did it?
Does do that a lot. I mean, many wrestling promotions do this a lot. There's not a lot of nuance sometimes. and I could always stand to see a little more context and perspective in wrestling, because Heat is often presented as this nebulous concept that has no weight of its own. It's good or it's bad. The most nuance you will get is, what people call the X-Pac heat, what I like to call the cold heat, the go away heat, the Shane McMahon sort of reaction. Those are about the 3 shades. But I feel like if you look at it just that way, there's a lot you might confuse between heat and hate.
Yeah.
And you've got to sort of draw the line and draw that distinction and work out what does your audience want to see, which would actually lead me on to another one of my points here.
Go for it.
If you want, which again, carrying on from the heel thing, of course, that's where a lot of my interest lies with a lot of what I do. But again, this applies to other sides of it as well. The concept of jobbing as something implied to be negative by its name. The concept of losing a match as doing a job, as this unpleasant reality of the business. I especially find that behavior troubling in heels. Because don't get me wrong, you want to keep a villain strong, you want the defeat to be satisfying. But if I encounter a heel who doesn't want to lose, I think, well, why are you here? Your job, ultimately, is to job. People want to see the villain conquered. Sometimes, you can see a heel win and it can mean something and be special and dramatic and even satisfying. But if you never lose as a villain, you're not doing your job. For me, I've got an ego like anyone else. I like to go out there and look at times, this evil mastermind cackling all of that stuff. It's great fun. But for me, there's nothing more satisfying than the entire place just erupting because I got my comeuppance.
Yeah. So who are your sort of favourite type of heels, as we're speaking about heels once again? Who do you look up to as a heel?
Who do I look up to as a heel? So I like... obviously you look at MJF right now, who is just doing phenomenal. I couldn't do it the way he does it. I can't lay into fans in real life the way he does.
Matthew on our podcast was telling us a wonderful story how he was at I think it might have been at the convention next to Double or Nothing last year. MJF took a fan's phone, opened up PayPal, paid himself $15 from this fan's phone, and then gave him the phone back and walked away. And this fan was just stood there like, what the hell has just happened? I could not do that to somebody.
No, I'm lucky that I generally play someone who's an overwhelming egotist who likes to be praised. So they can come up and interact with me that way, so I don't have to do anything to make people cry. I couldn't do that. I accidentally knocked a hot dog out of a kid's hand at a convention once. And in a fit of social anxiety, I ran. And that has haunted me for years.
Can you just picture the kid's face, bottom lip wobbling, I guess?
Yeah. I didn't stick around for the wobble. I was. You've never seen someone so big run so fast. I was off like a shot before the shock had stopped registering. The sheer surprise of, I had a hot dog here, now it's gone. Before they put anything together, there was just this big cloud in the shape of a terrified, at the time, failed game journalist.
But to take things back to the very concept of jobbing, I think it's something that's lost, especially in professional wrestling fandom as well. We need people to lose so the people who are winning, they look good. I think it's a really basic concept of wrestling I think is lost on a lot of people.
Yeah. My favourite night in my fairly moderate career was the time I got smashed to pieces with a chair. I destroyed. I couldn't eat for days afterwards, actually, because Wes Warren, loved the guy, but hell of a slap. Kicked me in the face, hit me several times with a chair. It was a slap to the face that did it, because he just got me on the jaw and the whole thing went like that. Greatest night of my life, let me tell you. People loved it. I'd been untouched throughout the entire thing for almost a year. Which I actually didn't like. I was like, oh, come on, let me, let's take this pot off the boil at somewhere. But they said, no, stick with it. And then the place erupted, and I was utterly humiliated and dragged out and everything, and it was brilliant because that's what needed to happen. And you get these, wrestling's amazing because you get to these points where what needs to happen doesn't happen because they think it's too obvious. And they think instead, if we trick them, if the villain doesn't fall where a villain usually falls in a story, that'll surprise them and get some heat. Sometimes. This is where that nuance comes in. Yeah, sometimes. If you've got the right talent in there and the right story, sure. But there's nothing wrong with the baddie losing when the baddie usually loses. And if you've built the story up to the point where it would be so satisfying to see that happen, then you've done an excellent job, no matter how predictable it might be. I mean, that's just something as a side thing that I have an issue with in wrestling overall is the desperation with which they try and keep things surprising even when you know the result, where it's like, we don't need 15 near falls every match just to have the result we're gonna have. You can do this one quick and dirty. You can just do the usual stuff sometimes.
And to take things back to the chair, I've seen many professional wrestlers say that is the worst weapon out of all the weapons in the wrestling. That's the worst one to get hit with. Do you believe that?
No. I've got a different perspective though. I have a herniated disc in my lower back. Brilliant thing to have to get involved with professional wrestling. But the thing is taking a chair across the top of the back, I don't feel a thing.
Really?
No, compared to what this thing feels on the regular, that's nothing.
That's
I genuinely, I mean, I've got a weird pain tolerance thing anyway, but I think that's again part of just having grown up with chronic pain is you shrug off a lot of the other stuff. So yeah, I can take a good walloping. It's one of the few things I can actually bring to wrestling. Don't let me do 95% of anything in the ring or I will kill you. However, if you want to crack me in the back with a chair, help yourself.
Modern day Mick Foley sat here. So moving on, I guess, to fourth and the fourth point, please descend down straight to hell.
Well, now I'm going to sound a little bit hypocritical because I did say it's okay to do the expected thing. However, again, speaking to nuance, sometimes it's not. Sometimes doing the same thing over and over again isn't great. Wrestling's lousy with that kind of thing, as is any medium. But one thing I've particularly grown tired of recently is the match where the established face fights a young up-and-comer, is taken to the limit, and then shakes their hand at the end in a show of good grace. Every bloody week. It does nothing for anyone anymore. It's such a tired, played out trope that's only made all the more frustrating when you remember week in, week out. The established face could afford to lose just one of these and never does. Or certainly hardly ever does. I love AEW. We talked about it earlier. You won't find a sexier fan of AEW than me. But exactly how much more mileage is there in Cody getting taken to his limit and shaking the hand of a young upstart? If everyone can take him to the limit, then nothing differentiates these characters. And Cody's done it many times since AEW's inception. And it's happened, you see it with the open challenge idea as a concept. You see it in WWE as well. You see it in other places. It's the same story every single time, and all it does is make everyone look rubbish. You've got the young talent that can bring the established face, the champion, to the limit, but everyone else can, so it's nothing to brag about. And the established face both is put over by beating everyone constantly, but also kind of looking weak by being taken to their limit week in, week out. By the time I get the handshake, I'm sat there saying, at least someone spit in someone's face just for something different to happen. That would put someone over more than the handshake. because the show of good sportsmanship is a trait that apparently every face is supposed to have, or at least most of them. And yeah, I've got nothing deeper or more philosophical to say about that one. I just do something else.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you raise about Cody, because you get lost in the story. He's a wonderful professional wrestling storyteller as Cody Rhodes, but then you raise a good point. I've never thought of it that way before, how everyone does take him to his limit, but ultimately he ends up coming out on top every single time. And just the realization of that happening, Jim, you've opened my eyes here completely.
That's what I'm here to do. I everywhere I go, I hope to illuminate someone's life, even with just a little flicker, if I may. But yeah, I love Cody, obviously. Yeah. I would credit him as being a big inspiration, obviously, for me, even getting a foot in the door with regards to wrestling. But certainly, he's got these two storylines. It's either, taken to his limit by young upstarts, or someone new comes in and immediately has a problem with Cody, to the point where he's, sometimes juggling more than one newcomer, usually with a manager who's saying, Cody, I'm going to bring someone to kick your ass. Oh, will I get out of it? Yes, I will. And I absolutely love Cody. But I when I first started watching AEW, I thought to myself, well, look at him. That's a consummate face right there. I've seen him as a heel. He's good at it, but they should keep this for a while. And now I'm like, if this is all they want to do, then I'm looking forward to seeing him, change persona if he must. Because I absolutely adore him, but I'm tired of the TV Cody, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense now. Do you think you'll wrestle Sting? Do you see this week's Dynamite?
Yes, I did. Do we know anything about Sting's hell fight with any of that? I wouldn't say no to seeing it, but if it's not safe for him to do it, obviously I wouldn't want to see it. So I don't know. I was not expecting that. I don't follow the news side of TV wrestling as much as I used to. I focus a lot on the indie side of stuff, and I watch Dynamite every week, and often I'll watch some Being the Elite as well. So I didn't know anything about Sting coming back. I didn't hear any rumbles.
Nobody did. It was a complete shock.
Oh well, there you go. Yeah. So I don't know what he's been up to even. So I couldn't tell you if I think he's going to wrestle or not. But if he's up to it and it's safe, then I will absolutely watch it.
Yeah, I think it's just people putting two and two together, because he's now on the official AEW roster page with the win-loss graphic next to his name, and people are going, "Oh my God, it's going to happen!" After sort of 5 years after being forced to retire, I know he was getting on a bit anyway, but after the buckle bomb with Seth Rollins, he'd hurt his neck or his back or something like that. Had to retire. Now he's back, and I am personally terrified, because Sting got me into wrestling. Back in the late 90s, and I'm terrified to see him potentially wrestling once again. But I guess if Cody's style, might lend himself, because it's more story-driven rather than all flips and death-defying spots and that. I know he's done moonsaults off the cage and stuff, but it's very much the story takes precedence with Cody Rhodes.
And there are ways you can get around with someone's limited ability or physicality in the ring. I should know. I've made many wrestlers do it for me. It can be done. They could put together a match that would still, protect him and give us some physicality. But I do find it interesting that they are really playing it close to their chest. Sting gave off the swagger of someone who might be getting physical, but never once confirmed anything. I've got to admit, they really got me hooked with it. There is admittedly just something about seeing Sting that automatically makes something feel big time.
Yeah.
And he normally you get some of the older talent out there and it looks like a bit of a desperation play. And there might be some of that, let's get an edge over WWE or what have you. But when Sting comes out, it doesn't look like he's been trotted out as this old museum piece to look at. He comes out there and he looks like he's commanding the place. And that's great to see. He looks like he 100% should be there.
That's the thing, because I know the hair's sort of receded a bit and it's a little bit grey compared to the late 90s, but he still looks
honestly,
like Sting.
It looks great on it.
Still looks like Sting, doesn't he? It's amazing to see.
The silver just gives him that elder statesman look, I think. It doesn't make him look old in a pejorative. I mean, old, I don't think should be considered a pejorative thing. But yeah, between that, the face paint, like, still looks really good on the guy. I think that he just carries with him such this authentic sense to him. This sense that, yeah, I'm wearing face paint and this long black jacket, and you might want to think it's tragic, but I'm Sting. You know it's cool. And it's like the stuff Jericho wears. Only Sting could get away with looking like Sting the way only Jericho gets away with looking like Jericho. On anyone else, it would look awful.
Yeah, and I guess sort of the allure with Sting and AEW is the fact that so far, AEW have used the older guys correctly. They haven't done a Goldberg over the Fiend, for an example, in Saudi Arabia. They haven't done that yet, and so hopefully, Sting doesn't win the world title. As cool as a moment as it would be, it would, you know what people are like on the interweb. Sorry, Jim. It'll be trashed on, wouldn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So what's your fifth and final offering to go straight down to hell?
Right. So my fifth and final is the hatred of comedy in wrestling, of parody in wrestling, of silly in wrestling. Now, I realize in some regards I may already appear biased. However, there really is this pushback against silly stuff in wrestling, specifically promotions that are themselves very comedy-oriented, things that might have fantasy elements, like when Chikara was still a thing, you'd have magic and you'd have monsters and football matches breaking out in the middle of wrestling matches. And there are many people that hate that kind of thing, think it damages the credibility of wrestling, will say it does things like kill the business. And I just want to say, honey, by your definition, the business has been dead for decades. It was killed when Vince McMahon, to save money, went into a court of law and said it was made up. I mean, come on, it's over. And to me, the prevalence, the appearance of things that parody the tropes of wrestling, things that make fun of it, that speaks to the success of the art form to me. That speaks to the success of wrestling as entertainment, that it's become that it has a culture that follows it so closely that it has many recognizable elements you can upturn and make fun of and satirize and laugh about. Things like, as I say, sports matches breaking out, a wrestler being lulled to sleep by the audience singing Rockabye Baby and then just being counted out that way. This is stuff that works because people know what wrestling is. In my opinion, a real good parody celebrates what it's parodying. When we're doing, if we're not doing satire and stuff like that. And that's, to me, is what this comedy wrestling, when you're wrestling the Invisible Man or doing the hand grenade spot, it's not taking food out of any more serious wrestler's mouth. The serious wrestler can do many, many serious wrestling shows. Many more of them exist than the comedy ones. Yeah. Wrestling can be funny and it can be silly and it can be stupid, and you don't have to pay attention to any of it. But to act like it kills the business, especially when what's really killing the business is wrestlers not being allowed to make money, wrestlers not being allowed to control their own careers, their own destinies, their own lives in some cases. When you've got billionaires outright saying the business isn't real, just so that they can save money, to then point at some, 20-somethings throwing an invisible hand grenade about to their fans who are loving it, and to say that's killing the business, I feel like priorities are dangerously skewed. Yeah. I truly do. Because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of wrestling is to entertain. And if someone's entertained watching a grueling, heart-rending I Quit match, or if they're entertained watching Kenny Omega fight a mop or something like that, they're entertained, they're having fun, and They're having fun in a way that isn't harmful, doesn't kill the business, because by the definition of people not taking it as a serious sport, darling, it's dead.
I just find it fantastic, Jim, when you hear people like this saying, oh, these comedy things they're killing the business, but these same people will celebrate The Undertaker.
Well, I mean, I've made this point before in the past as well with people, yeah. We've had zombies for decades. I actually it's cheesy, but I liked that era when any job description could also double as a wrestler. But the Mountie was amazing. The Mountie was brilliant. One of the best all-time mid-card heels. Isaac Yankem, why not? Britt Baker's actually taken that idea and done wonders with it. So I like all the weird gimmicky stuff, and it speaks to a larger problem I have in general with people who see everything as a zero-sum game, as this can't exist without it taking away from something. When really what's so great about wrestling is you can have this blood-soaked, violent, sickening match. You can have this long, grueling, story-built, heartbreaking match. And you can have someone sliding around in gunge like they're on Dave Benson Phillips' show or something. It's like Sex and the City. You can have it all. And that's what I like about wrestling. I got into it because it wasn't just one thing, because it wasn't just the same old guff that I could see anywhere else. That it wasn't a full-on actual combat sport in the traditional sense. I don't like watching boxing or UFC personally. And it's not what I got into wrestling for. I didn't get into wrestling because I think, wow, you really can believe that person's being punched in the mouth. And that's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it to be entertained. And there are many ways wrestling can entertain me. And I wouldn't want to cut myself off from the possibility of that varied entertainment.
And that's it, isn't it? Wrestling is a variety show, and that's when it's at its best. When you're watching 1 3-hour show, and I think of All Out as a great example of this. It's just everything was there. Any sort of professional wrestler, any strand of professional wrestling you like, it was on that show, and I thought that was the main thing that made it just a fantastic night.
I always feel that wrestling's at its best when it looks like it's not controlled. But it is. You make it look like you get this sense of carefully controlled chaos of the wrestlers being such huge personalities can barely be contained. And the variety show approach is a perfect example of that. Wrestling is big and loud and colourful and brash, and it's chaos. It's comedy and it's drama and it's violence and it's silliness. And that to me is when wrestling's at its best, when it's just a crash of entertainment.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jim. I think we've summed up that one quite nicely there. Just before we go, anything you'd like to plug?
Well, I mean, you can see me on YouTube at Jim Sterling. I guess I wouldn't bother. The algorithms tank that bloody thing. I stream on Twitch TV Jim Sterling. And, check out Rise Wrestling. We'll be back when people will let us in buildings again. Rise Wrestling in Pittsburgh. It's very good. We've got a good belt.
It is a nice belt. The silver and red combo always works, doesn't it, on a belt?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very proud to have it on my shoulder.
Is that implying it should be on somebody else's shoulder?
Well, technically it's legally meant to be, but...
Legally?
Mm.
Bloody hell. Anything more on that?
Well, I'm represented by David Lawless. He's the best lawyer in wrestling, so I think I get to decide what's legal.
We'll leave it there. I've been Ross Tweddell. We'll see you next time on Straight to Hell.